and welcome back to the BS and Beer Show. Tonight we're really excited because we had some technical difficulties 2 months ago and we didn't get to get this topic in, and we got a lot of feedback on when are you going to reschedule. So we're super excited. Tonight we're going to talk about design and really form factors. How does size and shape affect the performance of your structure? So I'm Emily Mottram. For anybody who doesn't know me, tonight I'm having a nice Pinot Noir because I've been at summer camp, and so it's like red wine every day at the end of the day. So BS and Beer is a grassroots movement. Everybody who is here is volunteering their time. So thank you, especially to all of our panelists who joined us tonight for coming and sharing your expertise. We encourage everyone else to start your own groups local to your area. The show started because we couldn't meet in person, but we can meet in person again. So start your own group. Just reach out to someone if you want to know how they're doing it in their area. The chat box is already blowing up. I see people. I don't know if you haven't used Zoom by this point after the pandemic, that'd be a surprise. But just as a reminder, in the chat box, pick everyone or all panelists and all attendees so everybody else can see what you're posting. So go ahead and post who you are, where you're from, and what you're drinking tonight in the chat box so all of your friends know you're here, because only the 5 of us can see who's here otherwise. Video recording for tonight's show will be up on our YouTube channel and on Green Building Advisor. You can find all of our past shows there. And we want to thank our media partner, Green Building Advisor and Fine Homebuilding, for helping us make this happen once a month now. So off to you, Mike, to introduce yourself and our guests.
Or thank you, Emily. I'm Mike Maines, designer in Maine. I'm drinking some sort of spritzer, trying to tone back after a few days of drinking too much at summer camp, or like ramping down. And I have a few announcements here. Emily is going to be hosting a Women in Construction Training Summit through Construction Instruction next week, August 15th and 16th, live in Denver. I'll put a link to that in the chat. And Travis's, I'm in company, but Travis is the brains of brawn behind it. The Rocky Mountain Building Science Symposium will be held September 12th and 13th in Denver, Colorado. I'll post a link to that. And the Southeast Building Science Symposium will be held October 10th and 11th in Charlotte, North Carolina. And the featured speakers for these 2 events include Steve Bazek, Jake Bruton, Coda Ueno, Ross Trathui, Ben Bogie, and the Colorado one has Robbie Schwartz, a local building science nerd. And we just spent, Emily, Steve, and I just spent 3 days with all of them and can attest that they know their BS.
They're full of it.
They are full of it and are happy to share it with everybody. And it's extremely affordable. It's sponsored, so there's really only a fee to cover. I guess.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and joining us today, let's start off with Elizabeth DeSalvo, is a principal at Trillium Architects in Connecticut. Elizabeth, fill us in a little more on what you do and what you're drinking, if it's something fun in that IBS cup.
Well, it's not in the IBS cup, but it's a classic gin and tonic with a lime. Lovely. I'm an architect in Connecticut, Fairfield County, sort of near New York City. And we specialize in only doing high efficiency, sustainable homes. The company was formed in 2004 with that one mission, and it's pretty much all we do. We've mostly specialized in single family homes, but we're trying to get into multifamily affordable right now. So
nice. I just lost my sheet. There it is. Kai Fast is sustainability specialist at Kaplan Thompson Architects in Maine, here in Maine and Portland. Kai, what else do you do there, or what is your role there really? What does sustainability consulting mean? Tell us a little bit about Bright Built. I know you've also worked on that end of the business. And are you drinking anything fun and interesting?
Yeah, well, I'll start with that. That's the easiest question to answer. I'm having Sea Quench Ale by Dogfish Head. It's a sour ale, which is these days the only beer I will drink.
Nice.
It is blissfully brewed with lime juice, lime peel, black limes, and sea salt, in case you're curious. It's one of 2 sours that I can pick up at my local grocery store.
Nice. And just to jump in as a beer nerd, a little known fact, although Dogfish Head is in Maryland, I believe, it's actually named after a place in Maine.
Is it really? Oh, wow. I
Cool.
didn't know anything. It seemed like a local Maine place. So I think of it as a local beer, but I guess it's not.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, I'm not a huge beer drinker, but I like a sour. Anyways, I am the resident energy goblin at Kaplan Thompson Architects. So most of what I do is sit in my basement and run energy models and tell people to put fewer, smaller windows in their giant houses.
Good luck.
Yeah, it's a little like who is it? Sisyphus with the rock? I don't know. I can't remember his name. Yeah, and then I'm also working on the carbon front, trying to get us up to speed on carbon accounting and embodied carbon, all that stuff. That's most of what I do. I'm trained as an architect, but I don't, it wasn't really a great fit for me. And then Kaplan Thompson kindly allowed me to create my own little corner of the office. And that's basically it. I do FIAS certifications and general consulting within the firm.
Nice. And for anybody who doesn't know Kaplan Thompson Architect, to be the energy nerd at Kaplan Thompson Architect, I don't know what a good analogy is, but that's like.
Super nerd.
Oh,
I'm sort of like Geordie LaForge on the Enterprise is what it is.
You must have left your mask at the office because.
Did I just go too far with the nerd stuff?
No.
No, not in this crowd.
Oh, great.
Last but not least is our friend Steve Demetric. I'll call him a passive house builder in Rhode Island. Steve, fill us in. What else do you do? What are you drinking? Where have you been for the last 3 days?
Oh yeah, building science camp, doing all that. I'm actually having a beer. This is my slowdown. It's a Canal Street. It's an ale made in Westerly, Rhode Island. I just hope the water doesn't come from the canal in Westerly, Rhode Island. But yeah, it's light and it's easing me into what I need to do, which is not do what we did the last 3 days. But yeah, I'm a builder in Rhode Island. I became a certified passive house contractor in 2012, I believe. And then we built the first certified passive house in Rhode Island in 2015. And from that point on, I've never looked back. So now I have a small construction company and we recently moved towards design build. And we're doing 100% net zero sustainable passive house building. And the other interesting thing we've been doing, which I'll share a couple pictures of on our current projects, is we've really drawn a line in the sand about size and scale of projects. And so we will not build a house that's bigger than maybe 2,200, maybe 2,400 square feet, depending on the customer, like what their needs are as far as family size. And we're also really directing our customers towards trying to create a more carbon neutral design. I'm not an energy geek in the sense of like I'm not running numbers and stuff, but I have a lot of anecdotal facts in my head that guide me. So I'm more of an anecdotal engineer, which is even greater than the 20% margin of error that Mark Rosenbaum is comfortable with. Yeah, so we're like our current project is, there's no spray foam in it at all. It's wood. Everything's wood basically, and smaller and more compact. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, to start things off, I thought we could all go around with our initial thoughts, including sharing images if appropriate. So if nobody minds, I'll start and set a low bar for everybody else. Does that show? Yeah. So this is part of the Pretty Good House series. So or like Zoom, if you haven't heard of the Pretty Good House book yet and you're watching this, then get with the program. This is a few images that we use in our presentations. So on the left are sort of Pretty Good House prescriptive sizes per person, and then national average sizes. As part of the Pretty Good House approach, we don't say you have to be under X, Y, or Z, but it's sort of think about what you're doing so you're not wasting space. And then on the left is supposed to be a bit of a joke. It's supposed to show what a pretty good house might look like. It's actually my friend Joe's house. It's one of Maine's finest examples of Second Empire architecture. Really beautiful house, really well maintained. And I know it's well maintained because he spends 1 year on each facade and just goes around and around the building, replacing slates and replacing copper and caulking it. So it's a beautiful house. It is not a pretty good house. This is Emily's Birch Farmhouse. This is clean, simple, efficient. This is a pretty good house. This is another one we use in our presentation sometimes by Maine architect Joe Waltman. Beautiful house. He does really, really beautiful classic sort of shingle style detailing. But if you've ever done any maintenance on a house, you know that's just as bad as the Queen Anne's Second Empire style house in terms of trying to maintain it or trying to make continuous air barriers and things like that. I used to be a carpenter in Cambridge, Mass. This was a house I fully got renovated 25 years ago. It started out as a 3-unit in rough shape, vinyl siding. But rent control ended and somebody bought it, and we went through and did a full gut renovation / restoration, turned it back into a 1-family. So it's about 6,000 square feet. These windows in the turrets are curved. There's just details everywhere. It was a beautiful house, but again, it's just a ton of maintenance. This is the first new home I designed that actually got built. I've designed thousands of homes, but we all start with the one that actually gets built. This is in Harpswell, Maine. My boss at the time was letting me kind of go out a little bit, but not too far. He and the clients thought a single barn-like roof was too big and monolithic, so they talked me into dropping the ridge here or the roof here, and I've regretted it every day for the last 15 years. Especially on the back, there's this nice bank of 5 windows, and the roof breaks right over the top. So just it's a very small corner. Travis likes to say corners cost, but this little corner is completely gratuitous. Little 6-inch step back.
The shingles going up that rake, I feel bad for the person that had to do that.
Yeah, me too. That or that's bad, and then it forced, or like this L, or was already designed. It should have had a decent amount of shingles here, but then this one sits down flat and it's not equal anyway. Just it's embarrassing, but it would have been great. Fine home building house, simple on the back. This is in Rhode Island from 2016. On the front, it got a little more complicated than I wanted because we had to fit in certain things for sponsors. It should have been just a little bit simpler. And it looks a little busy. The roof framing ended up being very complicated, which was also not my intention and not what we were supposed to be showing. So I've learned that this is the last new house I designed, built last year. Pretty good house, perfect rectangle, double stud walls, 2 bedrooms, but could be 4 bedrooms pretty easily. No extra corners, no gratuitous corners, relatively simple layout. So to me, that's a pretty good house. I wish the windows were inset, but we had to compromise with the builder on that. So that's my version of form factors. Emily, do you have anything you want to share or throw out any comments?
Yeah, you didn't tell me we needed to do homework, so I don't have any photos like up and ready, although I'm sure through the course I could come up with some. You showed one of my projects, which I want to just say was enough years ago that the white farmhouse was not totally overdone and completely whatever when we did that project, and we've have not done any more black windows in white farmhouse since that one, which is now oh my God, that one's almost 10 years old. So anyway, but yeah, my design philosophy is always just a lot simpler. And, we're talking about design, and I actually had somebody reach out to me today and they want to do a renovation, and they're like, we have a cape and dormers. And I was like, no, like, let's not make it more complicated than it is. So I think my philosophy comes out pretty well in the Pretty Good House book in the design chapter. And so there's a bunch of examples there. I'd rather hear from everybody else who's here. But if you want me to dig up some photos, I will do that while everybody else is talking.
Or it's up to you. Let's see how the how the conversation goes, although Jonathan Perry just said, please do. So maybe if you want to pull up a couple examples, that
All
would
right, I'll throw one or two in a.
All right, cool. Elizabeth, you're next on my screen. What do you have to say, or do you have anything you want to share?
Yeah, I'll share one project with you just because it has a lot of good examples of what we're all talking about, I think, except please keep in mind our clients are a little on the wealthy side, so they're not maybe as small as you would like. Oh, I can't screen share, so.
Oh, hold on just a second. All right, you should be able to share now.
Okay, so first, this is a picture of the house I'm going to talk about when construction. Can you see that, all that zip sheathing?
Yeah.
Well, it's on the building sections now, Elizabeth.
Oh, building sections. Okay, sorry. Well, okay, this is a okay place to start. So this, well, actually, let me try a different one. Hold on one sec. Can you see the photo of a house?
Yes.
Yes, yes,
Okay,
I
great.
recognize that as one Ben built, right? Ben Bogie.
Yeah, yep. So this is so when designing this, I really wanted to keep it simple. These clients wanted a very simple Japanese style pavilion. Well, I came up with the pavilion part, but they wanted a Japanese style 1-story house. So ideally everything is always a simple rectangle, but how do you make a simple rectangle more lovely and, more interesting, especially for a super high-end client? So this house is 3 pavilions. South is the long sides of the roof to the right. And so we're putting solar panels all over those roofs. And there are a lot of deep overhangs that will shade the house, not only for keeping heat out, but also for just enjoyment of the client's enjoyment. But one of the biggest problems we have in our house is that clients want a lot of glass and the heat gain can be unbearable. And so we're always trying to think about overhangs. And I personally don't really like gutters. So, deep overhangs, big gutters. In this case, I like, I'm thinking about roofs also more as umbrellas over top of the box. And so now we'll go back to the section. One sec. Okay, can you see sections now?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to zoom in. So the top is the section through the 3 pavilions that I was showing before. You can see, if you look, these are double stud 12-inch walls. We'll look at the center pavilion here. Double stud 12-inch walls full of cellulose. We are insulating across the top of the ceiling. The ceiling is flat. There's no equipment up in the attic there at all, which we love to do because this is by far the easiest, lowest carbon way to insulate. Just put 18 inches to 2 feet of cellulose above the attic floor. And so we're taping the outside of the zip along the wall, doing the window bucks, and then coming up across the floor, the plywood floor here, we're taping that and coming back down. And then we're just putting all the cellulose on top of that and making sure we're vented at the top of the roofs. So then you go down, this house is crawl space. We were using a lot of square footage. No one wanted a basement or needed a basement. So we definitely just made a crawl space that would be good enough to house all the equipment and make sure plumbing was good. And we're putting some batteries in this house for solar storage. But so we built these footings out of perfect block ICFs, which are recycled EPS, and they work as ICFs. You're still pouring concrete in them, but it's a smaller amount of concrete than a normal ICF that goes into the cores. And the forms themselves are half concrete, or not half, like 20% concrete, 80% recycled EPS. So they're pretty cool. And they get you a decent R value of like R27 or 26, I can't remember. But and then we put a little bit extra insulation on the outside underground rock wool. And then we used aero aggregate on the floor of the crawl space, and we just put vapor barrier above that and some floating plywood so that anyone working down there could move around without breaking the vapor barrier. So now we have just very simple rectangles. So each house is a very simple rectangle disguised with a little more, beauty. And all our windows are triple pane and that sort of thing. So all the equipment is below the crawl space. And so that, that kind of sums up what we're trying to do all the time, to keep the construction box as simple as possible, and good overhangs and a lot of water control, gutters and whatnot, or no gutters, depending. This house actually got gutters. I forgot we ended up putting gutters in because they wanted water collection, but you could do this house without gutters. Okay, I think that's it for the moment. Unless you want to see one more picture.
Of course.
Yeah, why not?
Well, it's just a rendering.
Oh, nice.
Can you see that?
Yeah, and I've read,
It's a little dark.
or if I recall from the articles or videos I've
Yeah.
seen, these aren't just gutters, but they're fully integral gutters.
Yes, they are. Yeah,
And integral gutters that actually won't leak, as opposed to
right.
what most traditional ones.
They better not leak, but if they do leak, it's just to the outside. It's no harm, really. And the other thing is that all the materials are pretty low maintenance. It's either stone, a really high quality plaster, stucco, and then Nakamoto vertical siding. So
Yeah.
we're trying for no maintenance all the time, metal roofing and solar panels on the roof.
Yeah, so just quickly, Elizabeth, in terms of size and complexity, I mean, this is bigger and more complicated than like the projects I showed that I do. But if somebody else had designed this project, a conventional architect, would it have been bigger, more complicated?
Oh,
or
yeah,
done
right.
differently? So it's
Yeah.
it's kind of all relative, right?
Right. Yeah. And the biggest problem with this house, obviously, is it has a lot of perimeter. There's a lot more places to have leakage. And if a normal architect did that, or builder, it'd probably be 2x6 walls with spray foam, with tons of thermal bridging, tons of air leaks. Because again, there'd be way more opportunity for all sorts of problems and air leakage and stuff. Yeah.
Kai, do you have images you wanted to share, or any thoughts you want to add to the mix here before we get into the open conversation?
I don't have images to share. All of my images are woofy models. No one
Go
wants
see those too.
Yeah. Let's see your whoopee.
lots of green check marks if I'm lucky.
Or
No, I've just been kind of mulling it over the course of the day and thinking about, big house, small house, complex house, simple house, and I see there's some discussion going on in the chat about the size of a house and whether they should be big or small, or what's better. And I can just say that what I've seen in my modeling, and I'm sure that anyone else who's done energy modeling has seen as well, well, first of all, it kind of matters what metric you're using to evaluate whether the house is good or not. Like when I'm in WFE, of course, I'm looking at the FIAS targets, which in most cases, they're not FIAS certified buildings. So I'm just looking at them as a general guideline. But FIAS is calculating source energy versus how many people are using the building. So by a FIAS standard, of course, really big house, only a couple people, that's bad. But then if you look at it, if you look at the EUI, you put more people in the house, you're using more electricity. So now your EUI goes up, and then that's also bad. So maybe bigger house, fewer people, good. It depends how you think about it. It's all just kind of math. I think that my biggest thing is just the simplicity of volume, as Elizabeth was saying. Like a simple volume just mathematically reduces the opportunity for failure. Complex building, more opportunities for leakage, and that's a problem. So I would say that my preference is to see simpler forms, not just because those are easier to get into WFE, but because they get better results.
But also not because they're easier to get into WFE, like it is nice when you're inputting to have or when the model's easier to put together, that's better for you, right?
Well, it's funny, the amount of time that I spend putting together the SketchUp box to put into WFE is usually a good indicator of how it's going to perform in terms of energy once I actually get the modeling complete. The more time I spend noodling around with wonky angles, and we're KTA, we do a few of those.
It's kind of your thing, right? Funky angles, but you also do modular bright built home stuff. So, or
right.
do you do modeling for bright built or?
I used to. So the funny thing about bright built is because the forms are very repetitive. I got to a point with bright built where I could usually look at a model and be like, that's a 10,000 kilowatt.
Right.
That one's a 6,000. Like you just kind of look at them and kind of know right off the bat. Yeah. It's a little bit more of a wild card on the KTA side because it's more custom and the clients are more demanding of things like excessive glazing and all kinds of geometric considerations. But I definitely, every time I do an energy model, I pretty much know how long did it take me to build the model. The longer it took, the worse is going to be the performance.
Is there any relationship to the easier to do bright built models being the ones that people buy more frequently? Right? Like I love that idea, right? We're here to talk about design, and I love the idea of it being replicable with bright built, but it would also be super cool if they picked the ones that were easy, but I feel like people are sometimes attracted to the ones that are more complicated by nature.
Yeah, I mean, the bright built homes are simple geometrically. The core of the house is simple as a matter of necessity because they're manufacturing the homes in a factory. So you can only elaborate so much before the folks at the factory start exploding. They don't like that. And a lot of times with bright built, how we made them look like other than a cube is like embellishments on the outside. We have the porch, we have the overhangs, we have the screen porch, all the little things that kind of dress it up on the outside. Because I mean, geometrically, mathematically, the best thing is a cube, right? I mean, actually it's a sphere.
Rectangle.
But
Sphere.
but we're not designing spheres because not everyone worships Buckminster Fuller as I do. I would love that, but we can't do that because building members are straight. So ideally it's a cube, but we're designers. We don't want to just build a cube over and over and over again. We want to build other things, and people like to see, I don't know, it's the
Can I throw something in based on some of the chat I'm watching and also talking about the cube? Like this is in regard to a couple of people have posted something about old school passive solar design, which I grew up on and all I used to design for sure. But in that world, a rectangle was by far the best thing because you wanted a long south side, get as much sun in, have it be shallow. But what we find, I mean, I had to change all my ways because of passive house construction. When you're super insulating a box and putting triple pane windows in, the passive solar thing almost becomes a negative. It so overheats the building that suddenly you're fighting the sun at every point. And every time early on, I designed passive houses that were just full of a south face glass wall, and it was a disaster. Like I had to go back and retrofit shading. So it's sort of weird and ironic how old school passive solar design is in conflict with passive house.
Yeah, well, because
a little bit of a way.
That because they're two completely different things.
Yeah, they're two completely different things.
Except when I have customers ask for passive house that are older, the first thing they talk about is passive solar, and they're just the only thing they have in common is the word passive.
Right.
And maybe the word house.
And because they're the passive solar design strategies that are going to make older conventional leaky construction livable. But once we fix all of that stuff, now those strategies are just going to cook us out of our homes. So
I think that's exactly the discussion we're having here tonight, though, which I think is awesome, is to connect those two dots, but to also connect what you said about bright built and being built in a factory, right? They're going to start pushing back after a little bit because it's easier for the box, but we use things like porches and exterior stuff to both create shading for passive house. So for the people in the chat box who can't get rid of their windows, got to have their windows. We all think light quality is important. We also think you got to build the shading devices we provide for you. Please don't value engineer that part out, right? So I think it really comes full circle. Like if they don't want to build it in the factory, maybe we also shouldn't be building that many other things in the field that are also super complicated, because that means the next person who comes along also has to maintain that structure. Or, Steve's trying to figure out how this flashing detail works on this thing that's got 16 different roof lines. Like, as architects and designers, we like things that are unique and creative, which I super appreciate. But I also think that it's important to use the things that don't affect our performance or aren't so complicated for the builder to build first, get a good air seal on, and maintain in the future. Is like, what is it, Steve? Like 90% of litigation is water management details or something. Yeah.
Well, and here's a hot take that I haven't actually expressed out loud yet, so it might be a little underbaked, and I hope that nobody gets mad at me. But this, sometimes I think about create, and I say, I send them the report out, and it says everything looks great. You've got a risk of overheating in these rooms, and that's not great. But also, we have this fancy heat pump that can cover all of the cooling load. So let's just go with it. Let's just go with the overheating. We've got cooling, and we don't need
you can put a VRF in there and just direct more cooling to a couple of rooms. But
yeah, but it reminds me
that goes against the whole pretty good house concept. Is you're just throwing money in mechanicals at larger, more complicated spaces.
Yeah, it reminds me of the international movement in architecture, where suddenly we were building everything out of glass and steel because we can put giant mechanical systems in and just make the same house that works in Canada is going to work in wherever, Spain or any other place. And that's not the way it should be. We shouldn't be using mechanicals to compensate for our lack of ability to design to the site.
Right.
And also, if you are using mechanicals, like one thing I've learned is, traditionally every HVAC person will split second floor, first floor, but you really want to split south, north, vertically, split the house so that you're getting the rooms that are overheating with one system, completely different system for the back of the house. At least you have a better chance there to use less energy.
Interesting. In a conventional house, that would be bad because stack effect really controls, but in an airtight house, the stack effect is really minimized, so it makes sense.
You also need a pretty big house to need to use 2 zones on the first floor.
That's the world I live in, man.
That's the other variable. It kind of comes to like that. If we think about pretty good house and who are we building for? If you're actually under the umbrella of a pretty good house, who are you building for? And I think of and who are we building houses for? Who needs houses? Everybody needs houses. And the majority of architectural discussions, they either start with or branch off into huge, massive houses for wealthy people. And that's why, as a company, we drew a line in the sand, and we're like, pretty good house means under 2,000 square feet for 3 to 4 people. And we have a market that actually demands that and wants that, but nobody's servicing it.
We
And
do a lot of
kind of like what really made me think about Kai when you said that as soon as I look at that model, the more time it takes to put into SketchUp, the more difficulties it's going to be, and the more likely it's going to failure.
Yeah,
It's going to be failure, and that's a great anecdotal fact that I'm going to start adding to my.
Well, yes, but I'll counter that by saying it can be a giant cube.
Yeah.
And proportionately, it performs fine as a small cube. The problem is when I got cubes with lots of cutouts and like funky.
Yeah. And that actually brings up the other thing about pretty good houses. It seems to be talking about energy and comfort, indoor quality, and indoor air quality, and all these things for the homeowner. What about the people that have to build these things?
I think we covered that in some material. We talked about that in the materials section too, right? I think some of us who are more conscientious designers, and Kai, you did say that you do some of this with them on their carbon front, is generally some products that are lower carbon also have some less bad things for our builders who are cutting it or working with it. Like if you got to wear some pretty serious PPE to install it.
I'm not talking about the materials. I'm talking about the complexity of the construction.
True.
The complexity of the layering, the idea of like we're shoehorning in new materials that people have never used before and asking them to do something different. And then on one day and the other day they go back to another job site because most of the builders aren't doing this and now they got to go back to normal. And that actually drives up costs, drives up problems, it drives up lots and lots of issues is when you're asking people, like regular subs they want to go and show up and do a really good job. And they know how to do that based on what they already know. And so if you start handing them different materials and all these other things in order to make that big cube smaller and more like boxy, but then spread it all out over the place and use other materials, then you're actually creating a you're taking away from a subcontractor's ability to enjoy their job. And I know that for a fact because I've done all levels of home construction. And yeah, that's a big part of constructability comes from people enjoying the work that they do before anybody moves in. I personally, I feel that's for me for Pretty Good House, that's actually a really important metric, which is why like when I share my stuff like that, it's guiding a lot of the work we're doing.
Nice. Well, we actually skipped over you, Steve, initially, not intentionally, but did you want to share
Oh yeah, I just wanted to share. I've got
images or examples of what you do? And
yeah, this is like our second design build house, and I just wanted to kind of show like what we're doing and like the reasoning behind what we're doing and what it's creating.
yeah.
Let's see if I can share.
Did you enable one? Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, is it going?
Yep, we see
Yeah, I
it.
gotta figure out how to. Let's see.
Do a slideshow. There you go.
Yeah, I just have like 4. Yeah, so this is just the elevation drawings of our current project, and you basically just give you a sense of it. It's 1,800 square feet, 16 something with inside with the double stud walls. I've got pictures of it too that you'll be able to see, but it's a mixture of the double stud wall, European glazing, all wood siding, cellulose insulation everywhere, slab on grade. Let's see, that's just a quick overview of that. So the floor plan, like one of the things we're doing, I don't know if we can see the dimensions fully, but the main box here is I think it's like 50 by 20. So we're designing off of the size of our sheet goods. That's one of the things that we always look at just for efficiency of materials. We've got our heat pump water heaters centralized, like the distance from the hot water heater to the kitchen sink, which is where we're using most of our hot water, like on and off all the time, is about 12 feet. So like you'll have hot water instantly all the time. That's one of the metrics we always look at. And then the second floor is what, 36 by 20. So like that second floor, you cut 2 sheets of plywood in half and the entire floor is sheathed. The other variable with this structure too is there's no, like we talked about, like more boxy, we actually created a little bit more rectangular. There are no LVLs in this house. So there's no structure to worry about at all. Which eliminates materials, eliminates labor costs, and just makes for much easier constructability. Let's see, I think I have a couple pictures of, where's the next one? Yeah, so it's another example of like this, the picture on the left that's the foundation of that house. It's slab on grade. And the picture on the right is another house that we did the other year, and you look at the size of that foundation, all of the corners, you can see they dropped the floor in just to get closer to grade to reduce steps. Like that detail alone added $30,000 to $40,000 to the cost of the project, just to drop the floor system down to eliminate a few steps outside.
Wow.
Yeah, radically different. Like what 1,800 square feet versus 3,200 square feet, and yeah, just by dropping the floor, you added 30 grand to the house. And also we added another sub. We had, in order to create the air barrier and water barrier, we basically end up spraying a Prosecco product on that, which is just one more product in the house that we wouldn't need. So there's some pictures of the ones we just finished. So like as far as structure, like we're using we're taking basic little boxes and we're adding just enough structure on the outside and ornament to make it look nice. So we're not trying to add it all over the place. So like this is our entryway. Even like our siding choices, like it's just native pine. Like that siding went up so fast. It's really when you lay things out properly and choose materials that don't have a lot of complexity for installation, goes up very quickly. It's also all native. It's native pine and white cedar shingles. So there's no maintenance outside at all. It'll just gray and do what it needs to do. Another variable we do, some other pictures of the outside. I think there's anything here. Like we added the screen porch, and again, it's all native pine. And big overhangs is another, I think, for a pretty good house. Like one of the variables that's really important to us that we focus on is durability and long-term durability. So deep overhangs I think have the biggest impact on how long your siding lasts. Like keep the water off the house, and you won't have to be replacing windows. Flashing details aren't as critical either. Just another picture. This is our mini split layout. But like for example, like this pine siding that went up on the house, I think it took maybe 3 days to do all the pine siding on the house. Like the layout was much easier because it doesn't really matter as much. You're not trying to hit key things. So like siding choices, for example, will have an impact on how complicated the design is and how complicated the installation becomes for the people doing the work. I want to show this detail here for our soffits. Like one of the things we do with our projects is we're trying to work around our material sizes. So all of the, like on the exterior of the house, except for the windowsills, there wasn't a single piece of lumber that had to get ripped. So we basically, all of those are based, and we designed off of the dimensions of the lumber that we get from the lumberyard. So the saves us on priming edges. Just the labor alone, we just take pieces of wood off the pile and cut it to length and nail it up. So again, it's marrying the simplicity of design with also the making it easier for people to do the work. So that's one of the things that drives our pretty good house design approach. Do you have anything else? No, that was pretty much it. Kind of went through those fast, but
Steve, that's awesome. There's a question about your soffit vents. I assume there's screens behind the slots.
Oh yeah, there's screens behind that. Yep. Yeah. So our philosophy is just really based on designing smaller, simpler homes for people, should I put it, for people that need homes, but and guiding people towards making decisions that guide them towards sustainability, guides them towards lowering their carbon footprint. A lot of people come to us and they have a lot of money and they want to build this home, but they're like, what's driving them to build this house is like their values and principles that they bring to it. I think part of my job as a builder is to help educate them about what the impact of their decisions are. And when you do describe that to people, it gives them pause and makes them think about it a bit.
I liked how you explained that, Steve. I have a community housing project that I do. It's a little ranch, and the homeowners get together and they build each other's houses. And they get really upset when the dimensions are off by like a little bit. So I mean, we did that whole thing. We laid out, all right, how many sheets of plywood do we have on here so that we don't have to cut too many of them? And can we span this whole structure without having any LVLs or any weird beams or anything that makes it complicated for them to do? And other than we don't let them do their own electrical, plumbing, or sheetrock. Capable of doing sheetrock, but nothing looks worse than bad sheetrock at the end of the day. Yeah. But they literally do everything else. They set the trusses, they set the floor joists, they cut the plywood, and people without experience and I think Betsy shared that at summer camp too, that they had this project.
Oh, yeah, the women's
while they're
building
doing it.
down the street. Yeah.
If we all sort of thought about teaching somebody who didn't know how to do something, how to like easily lay something out, that would be. So I appreciate that you take like, this is the size of something that I get. What can I do with that?
Yeah, well, it drives down costs.
It does, yeah.
And it
I-
really, when I think of like, I look like that house was built by, there were 3 carpenters on that job. I have a very experienced crew, but between the 3 of them, they've got like 70, 80 years of experience.
That's great. I
And
designed a house like that early on, sorry, and I had a normal contracting crew, and I told them that's what I did. I was like, you need just like 5 sheets of plywood across here, you need, and they were just like, yeah, whatever, and they just started cutting stuff, like ignoring it completely, waste everywhere. It
I
was
find that
terrible.
real craftspeople and real carpenters actually appreciate that simplicity.
Yeah.
And my crew, like we've done, like 2 of the guys in the crew have built $10 million houses on the cliffs in Newport. I mean, I used to do,
awesome.
$1 million interiors, and like we've been there, we've done that, but my crew actually enjoys building
It's more interesting, right?
simpler houses. Because it improves efficiency, and good carpenters really like efficiency.
It's amazing.
Actually, I had an interesting conversation with an architect the other day about design detail, and I was like, yeah, we can do it, but it's going to be expensive. He's like, well, how do you know? Well, I know because I've never done it before. Right there, like every time you add a detail that no one's ever done before, it costs more. Like grab a recipe from New York Times. If you've never made it before, it's going to take you a lot longer the first time than the 10th time. You know, and it's the same. That's the same with building. When you add different materials, add weird design things, or even just complexity of shape. Like if we talk about like what drives a pretty good house, complexity of shape is a huge one.
What do we have for audience questions? I haven't been keeping track of the chat.
No, you were supposed to keep track of the chat.
I know.
I can't do both.
I was too engaged. Let's see. Let me pick one here.
I noticed a comment from Armando mentioning that the North and the South are 2 different worlds when it comes to building. And I think that's definitely worth acknowledging, because am I wrong? Are all of us speaking in a Northern climate?
Yes.
And the way we build in the North is of course totally different. And also like the ideas about what a house should be are different.
Actually, I had an interesting conversation with at Building Science Summer Camp Monday morning. I was sitting with Katrine from FIAS, and I was, because the conference is in Houston this year, and I asked her, I was like, well, do you have a passive house in Florida yet? And apparently there's not. And I started thinking about it because of all the heat we've had. And I actually worked in Florida for with Habitat for a few weeks, and we built the typical Florida house. I showed up with all these block houses, you know, so basically a ranch house, block walls, and all we did was put nail plates to the top, lay trusses, and nail furring to the inside, and then they outfitted it, and it was done. And what I know now, that was 25 years ago, but what I know now, like it wouldn't be that hard to improve that house to make it like relevant to the climate, make it a passive house level relative to the climate, now that we have climate zones in passive house. What would it take to make it so that if it's 120 degrees for a week and you lose electricity, that you maintain the temperature inside longer?
Right.
No, it wouldn't be that hard. It wouldn't be a huge lift at all. So like as far as in the Northeast, we're paying attention to that because we have a huge temperature delta. And my question, Armando, would be like, well, why aren't we? It's gonna be so much easier down there to make them better. Like, why aren't we doing that?
Or I also have to jump in and say, like, people think like everybody in Maine is a high performance builder or designer. And I like to say it's really, there's like 10 of us and we're just really vocal about it.
Only 2 in Rhode Island.
We have plenty of crappy builders, plenty of conventional architects up here who are not thinking and don't care and don't think this stuff is important. So it's not unique to the or North or South. I think a challenge in the South is a lot of non-native English speakers, which can add complexity in terms of communication, but there are ways around that.
Yeah.
Well, I think too, there might be different attitudes. Like I feel like in the North, the sort of people who say have the income to be building a custom home have maybe more of a sensibility that lends itself to simpler homes. And that's not true across the board. Obviously, there's large, complex buildings, but I wonder if there's maybe different attitudes in different places where they say, I've got $1 million to build a home. It's going to be fancy. It's going to be sprawling. It's going to have, more space. I don't know if that's true. I'm just kind of spitballing here. I spent a little bit of time in the South, and that seems like maybe that's the way people think, but I haven't seen all of it, so I don't know.
Well, and I think passive house and pretty good house are going to become even more prevalent. I think in the South, there was one presentation at summer camp on Florida and its resiliency, right? And all of this climate stuff. And then we saw all the stuff that happened in Texas, and, before they never thought they'd have freezing and have all of these, pipes that were frozen. In the Northeast, we know we might freeze. So we've done some of these things, but like they're starting to see the opposite impacts. I mean, these 120-degree days. So
Yeah.
building resiliency into our structures in other ways is going to just become more important for the opposite reasons. But they've just kind of gotten used to some of it. Now it's getting to extreme levels.
Yeah, like if you take the word passive house out of the equation, like that's a word that provokes a lot of responses, but it's more about pretty good house should be about, we should add to pretty good house long-term durability and major focus on comfort and resiliency.
Mhm.
Like those should be metrics for a pretty good house. And if you thought about those little block houses down south, it wouldn't be hard to, first of all, they're block houses. That's the only one that survived the Three Little Pigs. So make that like the standard, and then add the right amount of insulation and mechanical systems to add that resiliency.
Well, and I did think that was interesting thing that, and Betsy was talking about a project that was in the North, but she was talking about doing a deep energy retrofit and then the offset of having a much higher tonnage heat pump system and the 5% refrigerant loss on heat pumps. So even in Florida, if the right answer is maybe block and foam, which most of us are like, we shouldn't be using foam, etc. If that's cutting significantly down on the heat pump refrigerant loss for air conditioning dominated climates, maybe we should also be paying attention to that, right?
Yeah, it's about the total equation. Like if you add this much foam to get this much value, then that's great. Versus the original passive houses where you had like 12, 16 inches of foam, it was for nothing.
Oh yeah, no, I totally agree. I was just thinking like in Florida, we can't discount the pretty good house should also take into account the size of our mechanical systems. Like I think a good design is really cutting down on the potential loss of refrigerant. And that's just talking about like 5% loss over time, a system that doesn't account for poor installs, complete refrigerant loss. Like, that part is really interesting to me as we start thinking about, design. It's like, oh, okay, what does that number look like on the carbon calculator in addition to the materials that we're using, which we've been looking at? Like,
like if 1 inch of foam is all you need on the inside of a block wall to turn that net zero and allow it to maintain temperature for a week.
Yeah.
A really good use of foam.
Exactly.
Take all the 6-inch foam up north and cut it into 6 slices and send it south.
Well, one thing I've seen in the energy modeling that I think is worth, if we're talking about Florida, is that when I have high cooling loads in my energy models, it is really hard to get it out. If my heating demand is too high, it's real easy. I put more insulation on the wall, in the attic, under the slab, better windows, good. Like I can crank that down real easy. If my cooling demand is too high, it is hard to get it out. And so I feel like in Florida, I appreciate the simplicity of the box, but it seems like the form also needs to be different. It needs to respond to the environment. And so like we have like wow, the word's escaping me, the traditional architecture form for the area.
Oh,
You guys,
vernacular.
yes, thank you. You know, the shotgun house, for example. You know, like I don't know how much new construction is honoring those older vernaculars, but it should be.
Those came from.
And certainly the shotgun house is a simple form that we can still do the things that we want to do, but it's I'm so glad I don't have to work in a warm climate, because I don't know what I would do with these models. I'd just be lost.
Yeah, or with design, we all like boxy forms. I grew up with Volvos, and a joke commercial back in the early 80s was Volvo's boxy but good. Or then it turned into an actual like sort of description of Volvos, and I think of my houses as boxy but good, and I've told clients that, and I see them clearly not get the joke and be like, oh, my house is boxy. It's like, no,
Yeah,
that's good, but just like clients want like articulated facades and interest and things like that, like, or like how do we marry the fact that consumer demand is for houses that have a lot of stuff going on, you know, articulated facades, whereas from an energy point of view, we like a cube. You know, what's the answer there? I feel.
Well, you know, I'm turning into a big fan of exterior shading. Like, you know, you set a trellis 6 feet off the house and it's vertical, and there's like a little, you know, something that just creates some layering that also works as shading, I think is kind of a cool opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also feel it's partly about what I find when customers come to me, a lot of them actually don't know what they want. They think they know what they want. And as designers and builders, like, we do have an obligation to educate them. And I think have a major impact on the decision making. But that's on a really small scale. Like,
Right.
that's custom homes, there's just that's a gnat fart in the market. So doesn't really solve that problem, but we do have, I think we do have an obligation to do that. And I find I have a lot of success with getting people to focus more on indoor air quality and durability. And the idea, like, I had a conversation today, I was doing a air sealing seminar for Rhode Island Energy, and someone was asking about my double stud walls, and it's like, I'm not gonna be able to get those developers to take that 6 inches out of the wall. And I was like, well, if you got a house with 3 bedrooms and the kid's bedroom is 10.5 by 12, like, do you think anyone's going to care if it's 10 by 12? Like, no. But like, how do you get someone to finally open their head up and admit and say yes to that question? And should you have to put them under oath? No, it should just, eventually people need to come to terms with that. Like, the metrics by which the general population is evaluating these things, that we need to start a paradigm shift in that towards other values. And if people started shifting that way, and then I think we'll make a difference. And I think a lot of those people aren't shifting that way because that's not part of the conversation. When I make it part of the conversation with my clientele, it's actually a really easy sell. You explain it to them, they're like, oh yeah, I get that. But the larger developers out there, all the metrics are based on square footage and based on values that are perceived values that are going to create market value. Like, who buys a house as an investment? Like,
plenty of people apparently did that during the pandemic, and it was not a wise choice.
But
the people who bought in the recession and sold in the pandemic, they made a huge profit. It was a great investment.
But I'm sure those were all intentional decisions, right?
Yeah.
You actually touched on a pet peeve of mine, Steve, just quickly. I know we're almost at time, but I think it would help everybody in the industry if we stopped measuring square footage to the outside of the envelope and started measuring square foot to the inside of the envelope, because who cares how thick the walls are, what the living space is the inside of the envelope.
Oh yeah, square footage.
Unless you have a really tight site where the exterior dimensions actually matter. I have one of those now. So like, I've had probably three out of hundreds of projects. It's mattered how big the outside is. Most of them matters how big the inside is. So who cares
When
if
I
the
deal
walls
with
are-
a project like that, they're usually on an oceanfront lot,
Yeah, exactly.
$1.5 million for, and it's like, yeah, I don't have a lot of empathy for that.
I always tell people the square footage is just a number that the tax department uses to determine how much that you owe them at the end of the year. Square footage has no other value.
yeah.
I mean, I've been practicing for 20 years and I can't go to a house and be like, yep, that one's definitely like 4,500. I mean, I can get in a range, but like people don't know what square footage means. It's just kind of an arbitrary number. So I appreciate you saying we measure it from the inside, Mike, but I also think since we're talking about design, and this will be my last input and I'll ask the rest of you to kind of give your final thoughts is, let's normalize thinking about the furniture and how people are going to use the space inside instead, right? Square footage doesn't matter if the bed doesn't fit in the room and there's a window on every wall and I have to put the bed in front of the window. That's a bad design. So let's start thinking about it from that perspective. Like put the furniture in the plan, make sure it fits in there and you can use that room for whatever it is, you know, maybe it's a flex room, etc. So I'll go around. Kai, you're next on my circle. If you want to give your final last like PGH, what's the most important design aspect, right? Throw you on the spot there.
No pressure.
Yeah,
Can be anything.
yeah, math. Do the
Math.
math.
Do the
No,
math.
I would say size aside, simplicity is where my heart is. I think, you know, we reduce the opportunities for mistakes and failure.
Keep it simple.
Steve, you kind of started it off when Mike sort of jumped in there too. So if you have something else to add, you can, or we can
Oh, more to add? Yeah,
you don't have to. I thought really felt like what you were
Oh,
talking about was
absolutely.
important, and then Mike said his thing, and then I said mine. So we'll let
Closing
Elizabeth end
comments.
us throw
I
us
could
out.
keep going
But
for a few more hours, but yeah,
yeah, we barely scratched the surface.
yeah.
So
Well, I think, you know, besides the obvious simplicity and size, joy, like everyone wants to love their house. If you can find moments of joy and design that make people actually love their house, the textures, the light qualities, the views, whatever, that house will be cared for better and last longer. And really, that's what we're going for.
Yeah. Yeah, I find like that's the work I'm doing. Like we're trying to marry that aesthetic and value for aesthetic with that simplicity of design. But I find it's a lot harder to design a simple, beautiful object. Like the modern simple lines and reveals are way more difficult and complex than like that first house you showed, Mike, with all that ornament. Like if you go up there, I doubt all those crown molding reveals are perfect. They probably weren't perfect from day one. But they were there to hide a lot of other stuff. So yeah, I think the simplicity of form, and I think I should come back to me a minute. I'll let you go, Mike.
Oh, I thought I already gave my thoughts about square footage, but no, I think I agree with everybody. I agree with Elizabeth. That's an important aspect of the Pretty Good House approach that we didn't, touch on is that for a house to be maintained and lived in, it has to be loved, and it doesn't mean you have to design it to X, Y, or Z standards. It just needs to have good design, whatever good design needs for that situation. And it is hard. It's easy to make a house look better by throwing more windows at it, throwing jigs and jogs at it, making a complicated roof line. It's really hard to make a box look attractive. And I think that's a challenge for us, but it's possible.
Yeah.
for sure next year, I think that we could do, because we'll run out of BS and beer shows this year, but we could do a whole design show on each kind of quadrant of, the US and maybe bring our Canadians in and say like, what's the Pretty Good House design for your area of the country? So you hear that, Armando? You're volunteering.
I'm actually Canadian. I just work in Maine, so.
See?
All right, there you go.
I'm going to tell the BS and Beer Show Canada that you said that. So they're going to invite you to come on and talk on their show.
Well, sure, but I don't have a lot of building experience in Maine, so they might be disappointed by what they learn.
So well, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. We've been keeping it to an hour. We could spend 3 more hours talking tonight, I'm sure, but I appreciate all of you joining us and everybody in the audience who tuned in, or anybody who watches it as a replay.
All right, thank you, everyone. That was fun.
Guys.
Bye.